Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. We may have a few people join us late. Welcome everybody to the Raft River Watershed Plan Environmental Assessment Public Scoping Meeting. Thank you for joining us virtually. I know that in better times we would traditionally be doing this in person and providing opportunities for one-on-one and face-to-face conversations. So we're trying something new with Zoom today, and we very much appreciate your flexibility and your patience with our technology. My name is Elizabeth Spalding. I work with JUB Engineers, and I am the public involvement lead for this project. And my role here today is to support our meeting. So I will be facilitating and moderating our conversation, capturing all of your questions and comments, and helping us work through the discussion that we have 1 hour for today. Just so everyone knows, today the agenda is going to include some project team introductions. We're going to give you a project overview so that you can learn about the initial details of this project, the schedule, and then we want to talk to you a little bit about how you can submit a formal comment. And then what we really want to spend the rest of our time on today is answering questions that you have about this project to help inform any comments you'd like to submit. We do have quite a few agency staff on the meeting today. We're just going to do introductions with those who are directly involved in our presentation. But we also have quite a few members of the public, and we're very excited that you are able to join us today. I'm going to give you a quick overview of how we'll use our Zoom platform, just so that you can better understand how we're going to capture your questions. We don't have so many people on the phone today that we have to rely solely on chat. So what I would invite you to do is we're going to keep everyone on mute through introductions and through our project presentation. If questions come up while we're in the presentation mode, please feel free to submit those through that chat function. And the chat function can be found again for those who are new to Zoom. If you go to the bottom of your screen, there should be, if you hover your mouse, a little chat icon that pops up. Click on that. Those chat questions will go to Allison and myself, and then we will serve as moderators and walk through those questions once the presentation is over. When we move into our question and answer session, again, if you have your camera on, I can see you. You can just raise your hand like this. I will see you have a question. I'll let you in to the conversation. For those who don't have their camera on and don't want to use the chat function, the other option is to take your mouse and hover it over the bottom of your screen. You can click on participants and a little hand icon pops up that looks like this. Click on that. It'll show us that you have your hand raised, and we will invite you to ask your question as we move through this. One thing I will note is that we do have a short timeline. So 1 hour is not a lot of time to really dig into the details. That being said, this is by no means the only opportunity that you have to ask questions and get responses. So at the end, we will show you a slide that has a variety of different contacts, primarily to me and the project team, but that would be email, phone, and snail mail. And you are more than welcome to reach out with any project-related questions that you have, and I will work at getting you connected with the right people and getting the responses to those questions as we have them. The only other thing that I would like to note today is that we do know that this is a complex project. There's going to be a lot of unknowns at this early stage in the planning process. We will do our best to answer questions. If there's anything that seems concerning to you that we need to take offline, I'll invite us to do that for the sake of time. So we certainly don't want to dismiss any conversations, but some of them we may just need to be able to talk to you one-on-one on for the sake of moving through the rest of the agenda. So we'll make sure that we can kind of flag those and work with you as we need to. Very quickly, I would like to run through some quick introductions, and I will actually introduce these individuals, but this is our key project team. Here at the top, we have Bruce Sandoval. He is joining us with this meeting. Bruce, if you want to wave real quick. He is our project program director with NRCS, and we have been working directly with him to develop this project and are very excited to be supporting NRCS. We also have our project sponsors and co-sponsors. And we'll explain what that means in a moment when we talk about the project overview. But we have Lucas Spratling. He's with the Raft River Flood District 15. He's waving up there. We have Todd Jarrett. He's with the Raft River Recharge Group. And we have Chad Black, who's with Raft River Electric. So these are our project sponsors and co-sponsors. We'll describe what that means in a moment. These are key partners that have helped develop and move this project forward, and we're really excited to be working with them. And as I mentioned, I'm with JUB Engineers. We are the consulting team that are preparing the environmental assessment and then moving into project design in the future. Hattie Zobat is our project manager and our engineering lead, waving there. We've got Derek Moss, who is our environmental lead. I'm Elizabeth Spalding. Again, I'm supporting the public involvement process. And you'll note we also have quite a few project team members also with us to help with the Q&A. So we may be pitching some questions to them soon as we get into that discussion piece. There are subject matter experts who are leading us through this process, and we're very happy to have them with us today. So I'm going to turn the reins over to Hattie. And as I mentioned, she is our engineering lead. She is going to walk us through a project overview. Again, I just invite you, as questions come to mind as we move through this project overview, please submit those through the chat, and then we will start to address them at the end of this presentation. Hattie, it's all yours.
All right, thanks Elizabeth for that introduction. As Elizabeth said, I work for JUB Engineers, and I've actually been working with the project sponsor, Raft River Flood District, and the project co-sponsors to develop this comprehensive aquifer stabilization and groundwater recharge watershed project. The purpose of the project is to provide flood protection for communities and infrastructure and to stabilize the aquifer. The need for this project has been demonstrated by the impacts of flooding, sediment load, and declining groundwater levels within the area. Flood events, some examples of this are that flood events damage crops and infrastructure and pose a risk to the community. Sediment load in the Raft River is impacting the Minidoka Wildlife Refuge, Lake Walcott, and the Snake River. And finally, declining groundwater levels are a risk to the sustainability of agriculture, which is the driving force for the economy in the area. Next slide, please. The United States Department of Agriculture Natural Resource Conservation Service has selected the Raft River watershed to participate in the Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Program. The goal of the Watershed Program is to protect and restore watersheds. It provides both financial and technical assistance for watershed improvements, including flood control, sediment control, and water management, among others. Funding for the program is provided through the Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Act, also known as Public Law 83-566. Next slide, please. The purpose and need of the project will be evaluated through the Raft River Watershed Plan EA by looking at different projects and project locations that fulfill the goals of the watershed program. Those include developing infrastructure to access water from the Snake River. And the benefits are that we will have the opportunity to stabilize and restore groundwater levels. Another goal is to evaluate locations of flood detention and recharge ponds to provide additional recharge opportunities within the basin from both the Raft River and tributaries and the Snake River. Those detention and recharge basins will also provide an opportunity to capture sediment, pollutants, and reduce flood flows. Additionally, the Watershed Plan EA will look at possible projects that will improve diversion efficiency for surface water irrigation systems that would decrease groundwater use overall within the basin. Additional work looking at flood control, flood channel stabilization and bank stabilization would reduce sediment load within the Raft River and its tributaries. And finally, some diversions related to agricultural use will also be developed to support flood diversions to reduce overall flood impacts to the community. Next slide, please. The following maps show possible project locations to help conceptualize the design and evaluate impacts within the Watershed Plan EA process. This first map is a basin level overview of possible project locations. Projects are numbered for reference and color-coded by type of project. A combination of agricultural improvement projects and flood projects are proposed. Yellow diamonds represent possible projects that combine both flood detention and recharge locations. The blue diamond represents a flood-specific project. The teal colors denote agricultural possible project locations. And purple denotes flood control and agricultural possible project locations. Next slide, please. The next maps are at a more refined scale to provide locational reference for the evaluation of the possible impacts and benefits of the project locations and type. This first map shows a possible project location for a flood diversion and agricultural diversion around this community of Malta. Next slide, please. The next map is a close-up of the Sublet Reservoir area, and the proposed project locations will evaluate possible improvements to the diversion system for surface water irrigation that also overlay flood control improvements. Next slide, please. The last map shows a close-up of the north end of the Raft River Basin and includes a variety of projects that will be evaluated to assess the impacts of recharge, bank stabilization, and flood control projects. Thank you. And now I will hand over the presentation to Derek, who will describe the Watershed Plan EA environmental process and how it relates to the Raft River watershed projects described before.
Very good. Thank you, Hattie. Again, my name is Derek Moss. I'm the environmental lead with JB Engineers, and I'll be overseeing the NEPA process. That process, as you can see here, we've got down there at the bottom, is an 18 to 24 month process, and includes several key steps. As you can see, we're in the initial phases on the far left there. We've initiated the environmental assessment. We've started to develop the project purpose and need. We're currently conducting public scoping, and then we will move into the next steps of this phase, which is collecting baseline data and developing alternatives to accomplish those goals as Hattie outlined. The NEPA process is very well defined and is a process that we follow, and we work closely with the agencies and federal agencies regarding specific environmental resources that we evaluate. And as you can see here, that includes quite a few detailed steps, including collecting the data, developing alternatives, analyzing those alternatives, and then ultimately determining potential environmental impacts from those proposed projects and alternatives that are evaluated. The resources that are evaluated in that process there's quite a variety of resources, including everything from geology, endangered species, habitat, vegetation, cultural resources, socioeconomic resources, visual resources, and so forth. Ultimately, the goal of the environmental assessment is to determine the level of impact from the proposed projects, and then if determined that there are no significant impacts, to ultimately end up with what's called a finding of no significant impact, and that determination is made by the NRCS and those other federal agencies that are involved in the project. So again, this process is an 18 to 24 month process, and we're just starting it now, and we're excited about looking at different alternatives and evaluating those alternatives based on their potential for impact and reducing those impacts as we can. So and, that's all I had. Elizabeth, I think you're next. You take it over from here.
Absolutely. So we'll revisit this slide at the end just as a quick reminder. For those of you who did get the mailer, this information is also on that, so you already have that documentation. But this is the beginning of what we're calling our 30-day public comment period, and that is part of the initial planning process called scoping. And again, that's where we're going to take public comment from all interested members of the public, key stakeholders, partner agencies. And what we want to do is hear about the questions, the concerns, the ideas they have associated with the proposed project. We will then, in response, follow up with each of those comment or groups of comments and address them within that EA. So for those of you who would like to submit a formal comment, today this discussion is a Q&A. Our conversation, either in person or in chat, that doesn't count as a formal comment. What we would love for you to do if you'd like to submit a formal comment that goes on the record that we address in our process is to reach out to me in one of these three ways. So you can always call me. That's my phone number. We can talk about your comments in that way. The Raft River at idwatershed.com. You can email your formal comments to that email address, or you can also put them in the U.S. Postal Service. And you can send it to that address at 2760 West Excursion Lane, Suite 400, Meridian, Idaho. Again, these comments must be received by October 16th. This video is going to actually be posted to the NRCS Idaho website. So if you have folks in your life who weren't able to join us today, they can go watch that video. This information is on that website. The flyer is on that website, so people can get their questions answered. So reach out to us and submit those comments. There's also, if you know anyone who would like to have that conversation in Spanish, please feel free to direct them to this 801 phone number. And again, we'll show this slide at the end just as a reminder that we do welcome all comments. We're excited to hear about from our property owners, our stakeholders, our community members, what their ideas and concerns are about this project so that we can make sure we are doing as full of an analysis with all of the information out there. So I'm going to stop screen share and pop this back into conversation mode at this point. We do have both members of the public, as I mentioned, and we also have agency staff. I would love questions and comments from both, but I would prefer that we start with our guests from the public today. They are probably less familiar with the project, and we need to give them as much opportunity to get their questions addressed as much as we can today. So again, we have a pretty small group. Feel free to raise your hand either on the camera with that button, or you can submit your questions through the chat function. I'm keeping a close eye on those. And Curtis, we will absolutely get to your question in a moment. Let's just open up our questions to the public at the outset. So questions or comments? Okay. So I actually have a couple of questions in the queue that I was hoping we could address. The first one is, Hattie, can you explain a little bit about the role of the sponsors and the co-sponsors so it's clear to them how that relationship works on this project?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, I can. So the sponsor is a municipal or quasi-municipal entity, political subdivision, or political agency within the state with eminent domain and the ability to take property, I can't remember that exact word, if they need to. And in this case, it's the Raft River Flood District, and they're the lead sponsor of the project. They're also the entity that is directly contracted with USDA NRCS to prepare and submit a watershed plan EA for their evaluation, review, approval of the document. We are a contractor for the Raft River the Raft River Flood District And we are the ones that are preparing that watershed plan EA for them, for NRCS to review and approve.
Great, thank you so much.
Do you have anything?
We have a question. Oh yeah.
No, I didn't have that. That was very well described, Hattie. I hope that answers the question. I think it did. Thanks.
We have a question from Curtis Elke, who's with NRCS. His question is 18 to 24 months completion of a NEPA process a conservative estimated time? Derek, let's start with you, and then we can move to Marty if we want some additional context.
That's a good question. I think ultimately the short answer is yes. That is a conservative estimate based on our experience, based on the experience of developing these types of EAs. We also have some constraints. There are, for example, certain types of field work that has to take place. That field work can only take place during certain seasons of the year. And so because of that, we're somewhat restricted on when we can be in the field and gather, in order to gather data and information that goes into the EA. The additional time that's then added on to that once that field work is completed is the time that's built in is for reviews, both internal for our own purposes and reviews by the agencies that will be reviewing the document and providing feedback and comments. And then on top of that, there's also an opportunity for the public to review. So within that time frame, 18 to 24 months, there's a lot that goes into that. It is relatively streamlined, that process, but yes, the 18 to 24 months is relatively conservative in order to account for all of those reviews, the public's opportunity to review the draft environmental assessment, and then the finalization of the environmental assessment, and ultimately a decision document. So again, all of those steps are kind of built into that time frame, and it's yes, it is relatively conservative, but it is realistic in our experience.
Great, thank you, Derek. Okay, I will open it up to any questions or comments from our full group here today, because I'm not seeing questions flood our chat function, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So in that sense, anyone who has a question or a comment or a consideration, we welcome your input. This might be because it's the dinner hour and everyone is hoping to get to dinner soon.
We have one question from Lynn in the chat.
Go ahead and ask that, because I don't see it.
Lynn asks, what role will the Raft River GWD have in the projects?
Who would like to take that one? Patty, great.
Thank you for that question, Lynn. The Raft River Groundwater District is one of the partners of the Raft River Watershed project with the Raft River Flood District, and they will be partnering with the Flood District in that they will work with them to divert floodwaters using their recharge groundwater permits that they've developed for the Raft River. And so they're supportive of the project and partnering with the Raft River Flood District and co-sponsors, and that's how they plan on supporting them. Anything to add to that, Lucas or Sarah Jane?
Nope, that sounds good, Hattie. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe, is it Doug Yearsley that's got his hand up? I just see the last name.
Yep, I've got a question for you real quick.
Excellent.
So as part of our Raft River Bridges project that we just finished out there, we did a sediment study on that river channel, trying to find some ways to control the sediment under our bridges. And we didn't end up employing any of that, but I'm curious what kind of measures you're looking at to control the sediment in there, because that would obviously help those bridges out some more.
Hattie, go ahead.
Thank you, Doug, for that question. That's actually a pretty significant portion of the project because the sediment load is significantly negatively impacting the Minidoka Wildlife Refuge. And the main avenues and processes that we're planning to reduce sediment load are to divert flood flows and the sediment load contained with them into recharge and flood detention basins and capture that sediment. It would then be removed from the recharge basins to make sure that infiltration rates remain high, but over time we want to try to capture as much flood flow as possible so that sediment's not actually reaching the the outflow of the Raft River. And we're trying to do that through the recharge and detention basins, bank stabilization processes, and flood control channels. Does that answer your question, Doug?
Yeah, it does. Just kind of interesting because, like, say we have a big report on it that we did, just studying all that sediment and had some recommendations for what to do. And ultimately, it wasn't ours to do, but I was just curious if you had some of the same conclusions that we did.
Well, that will be great to see that report, and we'll definitely be reaching out to you because that is very useful information to evaluate the potential methods to best reduce sediment load. Thank you so much.
We've got one other question from Jay Tharp, I think. He asked, who will be conducting the cultural and biological work?
Derek, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I can. We haven't determined yet who will be doing the actual field work. That's typically once we've defined the study area, the project footprint. We will then reach out to subcontractors to perform that work. We've used various resources in the past to do that. They will then coordinate, and we will coordinate very closely with the cultural resource specialists within each federal agency, and also with the State Historic Preservation Officer in establishing the area of potential effects, and then contracting that work to complete that the field work and the research that's done for this project. So. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you as to who will be completing the work yet, but yes, we will be subcontracting that work to someone to do that work. I don't know if Marty, if you have anything to add, or anyone else on the team.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify that we will be doing the biological and water resource assessments through JUB engineers. We have qualified biologists and wetland specialists on staff who will be doing that. And then, like Derek said, we'll be sub-consulting out the cultural resource surveys.
Additional questions or comments?
Got a few more that have come in through the chat. Jennifer Craney asks, does the project plan include acquiring parcels of property within the project area by using eminent domain alone, or are proper permits and authorizations being acquired instead of eminent domain?
Hattie, let's start with you.
Thank you for that question. The proposed project locations are all within private landowners that have previously indicated that they would allow easements. There will not be any property purchased through this project at this point. And eminent domain is not related to how the project will be completed. It's just one of the requirements of the Watershed program that the sponsor has that authority. And that is outside of my expertise as to why that is. It's just an incident of the funding.
Anyone else in the project team want to add to that before we move to the next question?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is
Allison,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, this is Bruce. You know, the eminent domain requirement is, I mean, I didn't write the law, but I think it's there so that we're sure that federal taxpayer dollars aren't invested to get us through a planning phase and perhaps even a design phase and then to construction without having the ability to secure the land. So that is a requirement of the project sponsors, but by all means, of course, the preferred avenue of securing land rights and land acquisition is through purchase or easement or some other means, less onerous, I'll say.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce, for that clarification. I think that's pretty important. Project team, anything to add before we move to the next question? Okay, Allison, next question.
Lynn asks, does the flood district encompass the entire Raft River Basin or only part of the river basin?
Patty.
Thank you for that question. Allison, would it be possible for you to put up the overview map?
I'll pull that up, Patty.
Thank you. That's slide 6.
Okay. Bear with me while I screen share, and then I'll pop it into full mode so that people can see it better. How does that look?
It looks good. Would it be possible for you to zoom in towards the bottom right-hand side of it so we can see the legend more clearly?
Not in full screen mode, but I can pop it out and do that in the other mode.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, if you want to go ahead and start, and then I will get this
So
popped up.
I'm looking at the map on my computer. The overview map shows the different boundaries within the basin, and the flood control district encompasses most of the Raft River watershed, as in the hydrologic boundaries of the basin, but not exactly, because it's a square boundary, and the boundaries of the hydrologic basin follow the mountain ridges. And so after the meeting, you can, and when the slides are uploaded to the website, you can take a closer look at this map and sort of see how the flood control district interacts with the Raft River watershed area. And then the watershed boundary has not been established. That's the specific boundary related to the areas that will be evaluated for the different resources within the watershed plan EA. So that's sort of like a specific word that's referenced within the environmental process, and that has not been defined at this point because these are just possible project locations, and we haven't been through the steps of the environmental process to define that boundary yet. Does that answer her question? Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Okay.
Good question. Thank you.
I will stop sharing, but feel free if anyone has questions about any of the specific maps or any of the slides, we can always pop that back up. So I'm happy to pull those up again. Additional questions or comments? Allison?
Yeah, Curtis asked, there may be a need for wetland determinations from NRCS needed to make sure we are not converting any wetlands in the construction areas, ?
So Derek, do you want to start with that one and then we'll...
Yeah, so that's a good question and a good clarification. So as Marty pointed out, we will be completing a water resource assessment as part of this project, and it will evaluate potential impacts to waters of the U.S., including wetlands. I think the one key point in that is that we will be completing a wetland delineation for this project in order to determine what those impacts would be, in order to determine where projects would be located. So the short answer is yes, there will be a wetland delineation, and it will help us to determine the location of those projects. So I hope that answered Curtis's question.
Anything to add, project team? Okay. Allison, any additional questions in our chat box? Okay. So I certainly don't want to end us too early, but we do welcome any additional questions or comments from our agency partners. Okay. For those project sponsors or co-sponsors, anything you would like to add with regard to the project? Okay, well, the good news is you're going to save those who watch this recording after the fact from a long video. What I am going to do is, again, share that slide. I do really want to, oh, go ahead.
We just had a question come in.
Great, let's do that.
Jay Tharp said, the map looks like the pipeline will only occur at the far north end. Is that correct?
Hattie?
Thanks for that question. When we developed the grant application that led to the project being selected, we had constraints related to the overall cost of different possible solutions to meet the purpose and need of the watershed rehabilitation. And so based on the initial cost estimates, we have shown a possible pipeline area that would be feasible within the allowable funding. That doesn't necessarily mean that that is the area that the infrastructure will be constructed, because we don't know which projects will be finalized at the end of the Watershed Plan EA as evaluated through that process. But that's how we developed the grant application, was based on some constraints of cost and reasonableness of construction. Is there anything to add to that, Bryce?
Excuse me. As Hattie mentioned, we'll go through the process looking through the hydraulic studies. We have to do a hydrology and hydraulic analysis and report that will help identify where the needs are, where the best route for pipelines, and we'll go through the process. So we just have shown on there that just as a concept, as a possible route to get from one end to the other. It could change through the process as we go through those studies and concept reports to identify where it will go. So right now it's just as a conceptual level shown on the map.
Anything else to add, project team? Okay. Allison, any other questions come through chat? Okay. So I am going to share my screen one more time. So again, this is the beginning of our 30-day public comment period as a part of our scoping process. And again, we really do want to hear questions, comments, and concerns from all of our key stakeholders, members of our public, interested community members. So if you would like to submit a comment, again, these are the 3 channels that you can connect with us to do so. Comments are due by October 16th. The other thing that I do invite anyone who knows of an interested stakeholder, perhaps a community member or a neighbor who would want some more information about this but wasn't able to join today. Again, this short video will be posted to the NRCS website, and anyone is welcome to reach out to us through that phone number. I will connect them to the project team, and we are happy to talk through any questions or comments that you have that way. So that is an open invitation to reach us through that phone number. Before we adjourn, I do want to open it up. Anything from our project team, project sponsors, or NRCS regarding next steps or closing thoughts?
Yeah, Elizabeth, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, my name is Curtis Elke. I'm the director for NRCS, and I just want to say on our behalf, we're really looking forward to this project and working with JUB. We've got a huge respect for JUB and just your talents and your skills, and I as well have a staff of very skilled people. Bruce Sandoval, one you know very well and gotten to know, and there's other members of my team here in Idaho that are there to serve and see this project through to its success. And we were approached on this project, I want to say 3 years ago or so. And so it's really nice to see this project finally moving along and where it's at right now. And I'm just really excited to see this project really get going underway. And I'm very confident that the people that are on this call right now are going to help and make sure that that happens. So thank you, everyone. And I know I share with Bruce as well that we're really excited to get this project underway and get going.
Great. Thank you so much, Curtis. Any additional comments from our team? And I would just say, Curtis, I know that the JUB team is very excited to be working with NRCS on this project. We're very excited about moving forward on this. So thank you for the opportunity. I will also say, project team, specifically Derek and Hattie, let's go ahead and stick around until 7 in case we get any members of the public who join us. I do want to make sure that we keep that line open for questions and comments. I think that is the end of our programming if we have no other further questions. So you are all free to leave and follow up later if anything comes to mind, but we will stay online for those who may join us at the last minute with any last questions. So thank you, everyone. Bye, Bruce. And Alan, I don't know if you can hear us, but I did see you sign on just moments ago. So if there's anything that we can talk you through with regard to the project, any maps you'd like to see, please let us know. We're happy to stick around until 7.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing something briefly. I'm sorry, I was late to the party.
That is okay. There weren't a lot of questions. Can you, I'm not sure if we've met. Can you give us a little bit of background on how you're connected to this project?
Oh, just a farmer out here in Malta, Branch Farms.
Okay.
Nolan Branch is my dad, he's been more involved in it.
Perfect. Well, we're excited that you were able to join us. So we just went over these slides quickly. Hattie at the top of the screen is our project engineer. To her left is Derek Moss. He's our environmental lead. And my name is Elizabeth Spalding. I'm the public involvement lead. And Hattie, your presentation was quite brief. So if you want to just kind of walk them through some of the key highlights of the project, I'd be happy to run your slides for you. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm happy to go through that. Thank you, Alan, for joining us. We're really happy that you're here. And I know your dad, and I've talked with him a lot about this project, so I'm excited to share with you the details of what we're looking to do. So the initial step that we're in is called the Raft River Watershed Plan EA. And that Watershed Plan EA will evaluate the environmental impacts of projects within the Raft River Watershed project. The first element of this project is that we're going to evaluate the purpose and need of the watershed project. And the main purpose is to provide flood protection for communities and infrastructure and to stabilize the aquifer. The need for this is demonstrated by different actions that have occurred within the Raft River Basin, including flood events. There's a high sediment load within the Raft River and its tributaries that are damaging resources downstream in Lake Walcott, Minidoka Wildlife Refuge, and the Snake River. And most significantly to the farmers in the community and area are that groundwater levels are a risk to sustaining agriculture. Next slide, please. The Raft River Watershed Plan EA is the first phase of the Raft River Watershed project, and the United States Department of Agriculture Natural Resource Conservation Service selected the project to restore the watershed based on the purpose and need. The watershed project is funded through the Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Program. The main goals of that are to restore and rehabilitate watersheds. With regard to this project, they're looking at flood control, sediment control, and agricultural sustainability through water management efforts. And then the funds for the watershed program are provided through the Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Act, also known as Public Law 83-566. Next slide, please. The Raft River Watershed project has several goals that fulfill the purpose and need for the project. These include some different projects that will accomplish these goals, including infrastructure to deliver water from the Snake River to recharge basins, evaluating different flood detention and recharge ponds to divert flood flows and capture sediment and pollutants within the flood flows, and then improvements to agricultural irrigation diversion for surface water sources to reduce groundwater diversions for irrigation. There will also be some flood control projects to divert flood flows around important community areas and agricultural areas, and evaluating the impacts of bank restoration projects to reduce sediment loads within the Raft River and tributaries. Next slide, please. This first slide is an overview of the Raft River watershed and the possible project locations therein. The different possible project locations are numbered for reference and color-coded by type. The yellow diamonds reference possible recharge and flood detention locations, and those are adjacent to the teal-colored project areas that are related to agricultural projects. Also within the northern portion of the basin, there is a flood control project that's indicated by the blue diamond. And then the purple color-coded diamonds are a combination of agricultural and flood control proposed project locations. The boundary of the Raft River Flood District, who is the sponsor of the project, is shown in the dotted line. And then the critical groundwater area is shown in the shaded blue area within that boundary. The overall hydrologic boundary of the Raft River watershed would follow the mountains of the area. And then the watershed boundary, which is a specific element of the watershed project, has not been determined and will be developed and evaluated during the watershed plan EA process and preliminary design that follows later within this phase of the project. Next slide, please. The next maps are a little bit different scale so that you can see the project's possible project locations and have a little bit better reference. Oh, we missed a slide. If you go one back.
Did we? Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
So one of the projects is a proposed diversion to protect the community of Malta and agricultural areas that are near that area. And this would be a combination of an agricultural and flood control project to divert flood flows to areas that can handle flooding and recharge flooding, or just allow flooding to bypass those areas. Next slide, please. The next slide shows a close-up of the Sublet Reservoir area and possible project locations related to agricultural and flood control projects as well. And those will be evaluated to decrease groundwater diversions and also protect from flood risk. Next slide, please. This slide is an overview of the projects in the northern portion of the basin. And this includes a combination of agricultural, flood control, flood detention, recharge, and bank stabilization projects. The northern portion of the basin has been most significantly impacted by declining groundwater levels, and it also is within the closest proximity of the Snake River. So that provides additional opportunities for recharge water sources using existing water permits and the water permits related for groundwater recharge for the Raft River And then that takes us to Derek's slide.
So this is, again, this is the NEPA process. So this is the environmental review process that we'll be following during this phase of the project. The environmental assessment takes approximately 18 to 24 months. We're in the initial phase of that process, which includes developing the project purpose and need, and then conducting public scoping, which is what we're doing tonight, and we'll have a public scoping period and public comment period for the next 30 days. And then we'll move into the next phase of the project, which is collecting baseline data, or developing alternatives, collecting baseline data, and then evaluating those proposed alternatives against the goals and the purpose and need of the project. So that's kind of a real brief summary of NEPA and the environmental assessment, environmental review process that we'll be following. But if there's any additional questions about that, I'd be more than happy to answer them. So.
And Alan, and I did see that we had Matt join. I just wanted to share a little bit about this commenting process. So we are very interested in hearing questions and comments from the public that they think should be considered in this project analysis. And so we would ask you to submit a formal comment if you would like to do so. If you found us, I suspect you found the flyer or the mailer. The contact information is on that. So that phone number, that email address, and that physical location. You can reach me at all three of those with any questions, or if you'd like to submit a formal comment. And those comments do need to be received by October 16th in order for them to be a part of the project record. But you can also kind of track this project as it develops at the Idaho NRCS website. So that address is there at the bottom of the screen. It's also on your mailer. Right now, they just have essentially the information about the scoping meeting, which is what we're doing today. But soon we are going to have these slides and then this video posted to that website. So feel free to share it with anyone you think might be interested. And then as the project evolves, updates would be provided on that NRCS website as well. And so Alan and Matt and anyone else who may have joined us a little late, we have about 7 minutes left if you have any questions you'd like the project team to address.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Firth. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
We can. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, I work for the Idaho Soil and Water Conservation Commission in the Burley NRCS office. I did a lot of work on the Raft River TMDL implementation plan several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious about the proposed structure or whatever on Kaja Creek near Malta. I guess, is that where it was that you were showing a possible structure?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a diversion and then like a diversion to put the flood water into some sort of a holding pond or basin to keep water from flooding the town of Malta? Or, because I know sometimes Kaja Creek can really flood big time. I just wondered if that was part of your project.
Go ahead, Hattie. And if there's a map you'd like me to refer to, let me know, Hattie.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for your question. And if you could go back to the first close-up map, I think that's slide 7.
Right here?
No, one more.
Slide. Oops, there we go.
Yep. So thank you. We've shown a possible project location upstream of Malta on Kaja Creek. And the reason why we've located it there is because of the risk of flooding from Kaja Creek. It's also near the flood control channel that the Raft River Flood District and the Raft River Groundwater District use for flooding. So we don't know exactly what the project would look like at the end of it because we're just at the very beginning, but that would be the goal, is to divert flood flows into infiltration channels, flood control channels that would bypass the area, and other areas that wouldn't have damage from the flooding, including some of the historic channels of Kaja Creek that have been dried up and sort of become inaccessible for water flow to move through during flood events. So does that answer your question, Carolyn?
Yeah, kind of. Would that flood control channel be on the north?
It would,
or north of Kaja Creek, or?
Yeah, so there's an existing flood control channel that the Raft River Flood District and the Groundwater District have been working together on and developing. And so that one's already in existence and it wouldn't be part of the Watershed Plan EA. This would be additional flood control diversions upstream of that that would also involve some possible agricultural improvements related to surface water irrigation. And this diversion would divert to the south so that we have an additional avenue for flood control, and also through historic flood channels in the middle. So I don't know all the channel names.
So this would not divert to the north, you're saying then?
Not at that location, but it's also just a possible project location. So the basic goal of a diversion near Malta is to protect Malta from flood flows of Kaja Creek, which is a tributary of the Raft River.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I know the flood control district put in a diversion farther upstream, right, by Connor, or well, where the road from Albion intersects the highway that goes to Malta. You know, that was back in around 2002.
So that project wouldn't be evaluated within the watershed plan, and this watershed plan EA will only look at future projects, but we will consider the benefits of that project and see how we can increase flood control and protection for the community of Malta in any significant agricultural areas that are at risk.
Okay, because yeah, I think that's important, because I mean, I grew up in the area, and I know that over the last, well, 40 years or so, there's been several times that there's been significant flooding in Malta from Kaja Creek. So it would be good to protect the city and agricultural lands.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
It's a great project.
Thank you.
This is Alan Branch.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, along those lines, I guess first off, take the opportunity to say thank you for taking the time to run through that again. I appreciate it. Also, talking about the same lines of this diversion on the Kaja, was there anything proposed further south on the Raft River or not?
Go ahead, Hattie.
Alan, we will look at what different possible project locations would have the most impact. That's part of the watershed plan environmental assessment process. And so we're trying to serve the purpose and need and evaluate the purpose and need for these different projects and how they accomplish the different goals of the watershed project. So if you have a location that you think that would be beneficial, or you think that could or may be considered, we definitely would like your input. And then the watershed boundary, which is a portion of the watershed plan EA, will be developed based on the next phase of the environmental assessment and some preliminary design work. So this is just a process. We're just working through it, and these possible project locations are not the ultimate end all for how the project will look at the end of the watershed plan EA. Does that make sense to you?
I see a
Yes.
thumbs up.
Thank you.
He knows his Zoom tools well. We are just about out of time, so I want to open it up for any one last question that's out there percolating. And then if there are none, just remind you that you can always find us with additional questions. Okay, well, for those who are still on the line, thank you very much, especially those of you from the public who joined us. We very much appreciate the interest in this project. We do look forward to continuing to keep you informed as this project moves forward. Todd, I see you turn your camera on. Anything you want to add? Muted. You're muted.
No, I just wanted to thank everybody for all their hard work. This has been a long time coming, and I'm excited that we're finally to this point.
Absolutely.
We're here to support you and the co-sponsor Raft River Electric and the sponsor Raft River Flood District. So thank you guys for letting us help you guys, and we're just really excited to move through this process and fulfill the requirements of the Watershed Plan EA.
All right. Well,
Great
with
job,
no
guys.
further ado, thank you. Everyone enjoy your evening. We will follow up soon with the recording and the slides. Make sure those are up for everyone. Thanks all.
Great, thank you.